Hello and Happy New Year, everyone! I just want to take a quick moment to thank everyone for the incredible support on the last video. For a long time now, I've been working to reach the last checkmark to become a YouTube partner, and in doing so, I took a chance talking about Godzilla on a channel that was more Transformers dominated, and finally shot well past the first goal thanks to all of you! Seriously, I can't thank you guys enough. You guys are seriously starting off my year on a tremendous note, making dreams come true. Thank you for indulging me. On the topic of the last video, though, I do apparently have a correction day issue. It turns out that I actually completely neglected to properly mention one Godzilla. Specifically, I ranked -1, but the picture on the tier list seemed to depict the Godzilla the Ride incarnation, which, in my defense, does look really similar, but excuses aside. Continuing on the topic of -1, the support that one's been getting is pretty insane too. It recently surpassed Shin Godzilla in terms of box office in Japan and the US, has been up for dozens of award nominations, had its US theatrical run extended multiple times, and is currently set to be re-released in black and white in Japan, so it should come as no surprise that talks of a sequel or some kind of follow-up are in the works. Now, thankfully, the versus formula of one-a-year Japanese Godzilla movies of diminishing quality seems to be over, as Toho has confirmed they'll be taking their time with this one to make sure it's good. But this has fueled speculation that they're going to consider having Godzilla face another monster again. And that would make sense, as we've gone through 2 remakes, air quotes, of the original and its formula focusing solely on Godzilla, and the specials Toho has been doing in live action certainly proves there's an appetite for some new monster action from the company that Godzilla built. But I'm not entirely sure about this idea, to be honest. Given how thoughtful and rich the human story is, a problem that past incarnations have had with a versus formula trying to maintain a good human story is that another monster may divert focus and leave one side or another lesser for it, and as a result clutter the story and result in a sort of spiritual remake of Raids Again, in all the worst ways. But surely there's a way to make it work, right? If we're gonna take some time off anyway to really consider the best route forward, certainly there's gotta be one monster that would make a good opponent for -1 Godzilla. One that'll not only keep the human element afloat, but maybe even further enrich it. That's what I'd like to explore with you all today. I'm going to propose 3 other kaiju that I believe are long overdue for a rematch with Godzilla. Ones that could really do justice in a sequel to -1. Starting with one of Toho's classic monsters and a fellow prehistoric beast, it's hard to go wrong with Rodan as a candidate for the next Godzilla movie. For those in need of a refresher considering his absence in legendary media as of late, Rodan is one of Toho's big 5 kaiju and a flagship member of their monster roster in his own right. Now, as tempting as it may be for Toho to resort to Mothra or King Ghidorah right out of the gate, I honestly feel like Rodan would be the easiest member of the big 5 to bring back within the universe of -1 on account of not being as flashy or out of place as the others. Being another prehistoric Goliath that survives into the modern day, Rodan could be a neat parallel to Godzilla and another living example of the damage man can incur upon nature. Perhaps a -1 Rodan could even call back to the events that inspired the original's creation, being mistaken for a UFO that was responsible for taking out airlines and stoking post-war tensions following the Castle Bravo nuclear test in the 50s. That could also tie into Godzilla's return, maybe irradiating him and giving him a little bump in the right direction to attack Japan again. Not to mention how thrilling a modern, horror-adjacent update to Rodan could be. Something that wasn't played up quite as much in the original, but could service this one well with director Takashi Yamazaki's knack for intimate and primal monster thrills, playing up just how frightening it would be for a fragile population to fall prey to a flying monster, just as the first one expertly displayed the true horror of going up against a sea-bound beast like Godzilla. But what I think is the best part about Rodan and the potential for calling back to his original take hopefully in time for his 70th anniversary in 2026, would be to touch upon the surprisingly heartfelt story of that original monster, to capitalize on those themes and use it as a thematic tie to the evolution of Shikishima and Noriko's family. Godzilla Minus One ends on a note where their reconciliation and future together is more up in the air. Why not compound on that with a monster to represent the struggles of a family unit in such a hazardous situation, fighting against greater forces conspiring against them? For that, they could feature more than one Rodan struggling to survive against retaliation from the Japanese people, and a territorial Godzilla as an embodiment of that struggle, as Godzilla himself was an embodiment of the trauma inflicted on the Japanese public, and our protagonist in particular after World War II. Visualize the terror of the H-bomb at the time and the fears relevant to the people, like threats to their livelihood with diminishing or contaminated food supplies, or with an overbearing presence constantly shaking up and asserting itself over their way of life. Rodan would be an excellent candidate, for thematic reasons and the potential for expanded symbolism, but maybe you're not convinced. Maybe Rodan has potential but isn't flashy enough for people, or is maybe a bit overused. Certainly not by Legendary, but hey, for sake of argument, let's explore another option that could be a fun rematch and still carry some real-world weight. One of many other monsters in Toho's roster celebrating a major anniversary this year, King Cesar is a strong candidate for a new opponent and ripe for story potential at that. While not as major as even Anguirus, arguably, King Cesar is a popular monster in his own right and a character that's gone from friend to foe before on multiple occasions. So it wouldn't be too out of place for a follow-up Japanese movie to depict him in a different light against Godzilla. While more on the mystic side of kaiju, I feel like King Cesar is a lot more palatable and open to interpretation, compared to something like Mothra. In a way, King Cesar could, perhaps, mirror Godzilla's own legendary status in-universe on Odo Island through his relationship with the people of Okinawa. Just as well, in a movie ripe with political commentary critical of not only the US occupation/war culture around the time, but Japan's own government as well, spotlighting the relationship and abuse by both nations against native Okinawans could be an ideal route to engender a more sympathetic view of King Cesar against a malevolent Godzilla, expanding upon the original intent of the creature as a guardian to those in need. How likely it is given political views of older generation of Japanese people when it comes to Okinawans is up for debate, but it opens up an excellent opportunity to celebrate the character and uplift the people he is supposed to represent, as opposed to his past incarnations in dumb, fun action movies. But, okay, maybe that's not an option, maybe it's too tender of a subject in the current climate, or maybe King Cesar just isn't what they're looking for. Well, how about theoretically pitting the two most successful modern incarnations of Godzilla against each other? Or at least doing so in spirit while honoring one of the creative minds behind the series. Okay, this one is a bit more out there and will require some explanation for more casual fans of the series. People who played the Super Nintendo Super Godzilla game might recognize this guy, or at least a version of him, as the final boss of that game. But to more initiated fans, there's a considerable history to the would-be monster Bogan. Proposed dozens of times across the Heisei era as an opponent for Godzilla, Bogan is a monster that's something of a legend in the kaiju fandom, for just how many near misses he had despite being such an interesting character. Starting off as an opponent proposed for Godzilla's return in the Heisei era, and knocked around as late into the era as the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy, Bogan is a versatile ancient monster and was a personal favorite of producer and Godzilla creator Tomoyuki Tanaka. I won't go over his whole history now, you can check out his kaiju profile from Wikizilla if you want to learn more behind the scenes details, or just get a refresher in the likely event you've already seen their great work. But the point of the matter is that a lot of things held Bogan back over the years despite his potential. That wouldn't necessarily be an issue anymore, as Shin has shown masterfully. See, the problem that stopped Bogan early on in the Godzilla Returns days was a shape-shifting aspect that allowed him to transform into 3 or 4 other forms across the various pitches. A major budgetary concern at a time where the company wasn't certain about the bankability of their monster star, even for such a major anniversary. Wait. A black and red shape-shifting monster that adapts and regenerates to combat threats in more and more terrifying forms? That sounds familiar. For better or for worse, with CGI at the forefront as the medium to depict kaiju in Japanese and American Godzilla film productions, models for Bogan's various forms would likely be the perfect way to finally realize the monster on the big screen, without a lot of elaborate miniatures or animatronics for each form, or to convey the creature morphing between them. While I can't think of a thematically rich angle for Bogan compared to his counterparts on the list, it seems only fitting on the 70th anniversary of Godzilla to put into production a movie where an unused monster, one that's taken on such a life of its own and seen enough demand to be realized, that it's even appeared in recent projects like Godzilla, finally get his chance to shine now that technology has caught up with the ambitions of the original creator who pushed so hard for him throughout the Heisei era. A perfect way to pay respect to the fans and some of the people who helped pave the way for Godzilla to become the cultural icon that he is today. And those are my 3 suggestions for Toho kaiju I'd like to see go up against Godzilla in the new Japanese-produced Godzilla movie. What do you think of these choices? Did you agree with any of them, or do you have any other monsters you'd like to make a case for instead? If so, I'd love to hear who else you guys would like to see next in the comments below. Until next time, take care and hope to see you again soon.